Welcome to ADAS Talk. My name is Owen Van Eck with ADAS Fine, and today I have here with me Bob LaCross.
How you doing, Owen?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Same thing, Owen. Doing fine.
Yep. All right. So today we're going to be talking about a little bit of ADAS, how it's growing in the industry, how it's evolving, where we're heading with it, and simple solutions on how we can resolve what we're lacking in the industry as well. Bob, you want to kick it off with your past credentials, what you have been through
with ADAS itself?
Yeah.
We'll start out. I was a business owner of a brick and mortar business for about 17 years. Part of my business plan was to do mobile work for other shops in collision centers. And then as time moved along, what happened is I started getting asked by this one shop down in Hastings, Michigan to do a CCM, a cruise control module calibration on a 13 Ford Taurus. And I was a little up in the air. I'd never heard of it before. So I researched it on Ford's PTS site. And I said, sure, I'll go down. You just need to pull the front bumper. Okay, so I can align it, make sure it's vertically set. And then they even had some more information about what the radar was looking for, drive down a highway, start counting the options, kind of give you a little tidbit. So I did that and everything calibrated fine, returned it back to the collision center. And then probably it took about another 2 years before the collision center started asking me about ADAS. And I had to look into it a little bit more to see what was required. And then I realized you have to buy targets, and then it costs money. So I said, well, in order to make money, you got to spend money. Right. I went ahead and spent the money, and then as I started to acquire the equipment coming in, I started providing more and more services to my customers. And then from there, it just took off. I've been doing this pretty steady since about 2015, 16 range. Yeah. Experienced a lot. It's been a big learning curve, and every time I turn around, it's still a learning curve.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Now, to give you a quick question off of that, what would you say was your most difficult experience from that range since 2015 that you've been dealing with ADAS, and why, from here to now?
The biggest experience, as in diagnostics or diagnostics?
Yeah, I'd say diagnostics in the ADAS field.
Yeah, diagnostics in the ADAS field. Probably the biggest challenge is getting to understand how the systems work, because each system operates basically the same. All right, an example would be your blind spot. Now, the blind spot module can also be used for cross-traffic alert. All it is software that's programmed into it. It's whatever the manufacturer wants, and then its vendor will provide that for them. So understanding the systems and what they're looking for and doing trial and error is what you have to use to diagnose the vehicle. If you're doing a camera, all right, is it a lighting condition? All right, are you getting reflection off the hood? I mean, these are all T&Es because you're out there flipping light switches and everything, trying to get the right position. And once you start to understand what each make is looking for, and even in the background could be a big difference as well. So you actually have to look around your surroundings. And it was all T&E, trial and error. I mean, but after about a year and a half, it started coming to you. And then after that, the fixes become easier and easier. And then all of a sudden you get taken for a loop again. And now you have to think about it. You remember that time with that eyesight up north that you were trying to calibrate?
I do remember that, yeah.
Yeah, you remember that?
Yep, I do remember that.
Yeah, it was driving you nuts.
It was.
And then based on my experience, I was like, hey, does it look like a dirt road vehicle to you?
Mm-hmm.
And then you check the fender wells, and it was.
Yep.
Then I'm like, okay, dirt road vehicles, they have windows open, dirt, which is similar to if you're in a collision center, it's a little tidbit. Make sure you cover up the eyesights or cameras in general. Put them in a Ziploc bag, because it'll be just like that dirt road vehicle where the lens was what?
Lens is covered in dirt.
Covered in dirt, and just like your glasses that I have on right now. Everything looks fine until I go outside in the bright light, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I have to clean my glasses. Mm-hmm. Well, it's the same effect. They're an extension of your eyes. That's all a camera is.
Yep, very well explained. Yeah, because eyesight is a pretty messy one to deal with.
Yeah, challenging, very demographic.
It really is. It really is. So, as Bob was saying, I used to be an ADAS calibration technician, actually working with Bob a little bit ago now. So, I learned just about everything I know from him. I mean, with ADAS, diagnostics, I'm still learning every day, but I mean, it is challenging and it's growing. Every year there's something new coming out, whether it be to calibrate a car or just the system itself. Just so much is evolving right now in the industry. Bob, do you want to give some feedback on where you think we're going right now with, how ADAS is changing in the industry?
Yeah, ADAS is becoming more popular on vehicles now. I think for the most part, probably 90% of your vehicles coming off the assembly line and have one form of ADAS or another on it.
Yeah.
And it's our responsibility to start looking for these features. And a lot of times, if you go out to the OE sites, they'll give you like a little tidbit of upcoming changes and features that are being added on. For the longest time, the Asians were more into the static calibrations, where dynamic played a role a little bit here and there. And the domestics, they're pretty much, for the most part, except for some surround view calibrations, they're pretty much dynamic. Then they realized, the manufacturers, that having to do it static all the time wasn't always convenient. So then they started moving a little bit more toward the dynamic portion. And then sometimes now what they offer is both. You get an option. Do you want to do it statically inside, or do you want to drive it down the road? So most of us in good weather naturally want to drive it down the road. But in the wintertime, you got a lot of snow on the road, can't see the lines too well. So now you want to do it statically. And then that creates maybe another issue in the wintertime, because now you got to check the operation of it. And you may have to come back and do that portion of it, because you're not going to get a true representation going down the road being snow covered, that it's operating correctly. So that's normally an additional charge to do that, or a shop would line up another job for us and we just go out and do it right quick.
Yeah.
Once the weather conditions permit.
Yeah. So with ADAS, as it being really complicated, you mess with it a lot, try to get it to work with you. Why would you say, for body shops right now, what makes it difficult for them to incorporate more ADAS calibrations with the vehicles that they're working on, catching it, throwing it in estimates, with the importance of it? Why do you think it's being missed, even with tools available like ADAS Find or ADAS Think, tools that are very helpful to catch those ADAS systems? In your experience, what would you say is the reasoning behind that still being missed, because there's tools out there to help with it?
Yes. You find that most of your bigger collision centers are ramped up for this because they've been dealing with it for a long time, and they've actually had more time to prepare for this and to get systems in place. Okay. Now what you face is the smaller MSOs, you're talking to independents and so forth. They're starting to see more and more of it as they become aware of it. But for them to follow up on their estimators to make sure that they do that quality control check for the safety items, this is what's becoming the issue. And all you're trying to do is offer an easy button to them. Yeah. You look it up, you get done with your estimate, you're going to submit that CCC right to you. Within a minute or so, it's going to come back. It's going to highlight what calibrations are going to be required, give you a hyperlink. That's an easy button. Yeah. And that should be done once the estimate is done, okay, all the way. And then that should be your next thing, because you would have already done your pre-scan, okay, to give you an idea of what you're dealing with. All right, so let's not forget that. And then you're going to do the ADAS Find report. You're going to get that populated. So now when you submit that to the insurance company, all right, they should be screening it. That's usually what they do, the repairs that's being done. And they themselves, the insurance company, should be ensuring that you're checking the airbag systems, ensuring that the ADAS is being performed when required by the OE. Because most collision shops are rated, okay, based on the customer service, all right? Well, the customer service is not completed until ADAS is done too. Yes. So they should be checking that. Not just rating the shop on, hey, the paint looks good, the fit looks good, all right? They need to go that extra mile and ensure that the vendor that's providing the service for their customer, okay, is actually doing the other safety circuits and anything else that may be required by the OE.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's all about getting everything right for the customer.
It's part of your quality control.
Yeah.
When you return a vehicle, yeah, it looks nice and pretty, but it needs to be safe. Okay, that's the number one thing.
Definitely. Definitely. Now, would you say dealing with insurance on that aspect of getting an ADAS finder for the shops that are using ADAS Find, ADAS Think, whatever tools are out there, there is backlash with it?
Yes. And what it is when you're dealing with the insurance companies, like I myself don't deal with them a whole lot, but there are cases where I have to speak for the owner or for the shop and so forth, or for an estimator. And they're trying to find these gray areas in the wording. Okay. An example would be like Toyota Tacoma, all right, a Toyota Tundra, all right, them are framed vehicles, all right. So in Toyota's service information, it states that if you get involved in a collision, okay, you have to remove the passenger seat and check it for warpage. I think it's plus or minus 3 millimeter. Well, when you do that, let's say everything's good to go, all right, you have to put that passenger seat back in. Well, now you need to calibrate that, do a 0-point calibration on that seat.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of your insurance agents are saying, well, I ain't paying for that. Well, I think that's very important, okay?
Yeah.
Where we're dealing with a passenger here, granted, the driver's side will work fine, but we're there to do other ADAS calibrations, but that's a safety item right there, and they're going to argue about $60. It'll cost them more in the long run. So I guess what I'm implying is that the insurance company needs to ensure the same amount of responsibility as the collision shop does. Not just say, well, I ain't going to pay for it. You see where I'm going there? That really gets me upset because the customer is paying a premium to have their vehicle returned back to factory conditions. And for them to say that really sends me a bad message, and it really gets me upset. It's not about the money. And also what happens, a lot of your collision shops will eat that just so they know that that vehicle is done right. So now, so now the insurance company is asking them to go backwards because they want to do the right thing. That's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's a mess with figuring out, when you do get it figured out, what has to be calibrated. That is a big deal with backlash on insurance, covering it. And I mean, just getting to the point on why it's important, showing them, hey, we got the links from, Toyota, like you just said with the seat. They took it off to check from 300 millimeters.
It'll be 3 millimeters plus or minus.
3 millimeters, sorry. You're removing the seat, so you got to do that 0-point calibration.
Correct.
So it's all about what's in service information. And I mean, that's why we have tools like ADAS Find to help with that. Removing hours of more work to find what's necessary for you so you can get what you need for the customer. It's a matter of safety for the customer, getting things right for the customer, even if insurance may fight it back a little bit. It's important to get it right for the customer.
And what happens sometimes, Owen, is that the collision shop, all right, the owner, estimator, sometimes they just give up because of the fact that they're tired of fighting. To get this, I mean, you're spending all that time trying to educate an adjuster that may be new or someone that's been in the system way too long, all right, to change with the times. And it's exhausting. And you're not making a dime on that when you do that. So a lot of times, I'm not saying all the time, they'll just say, hey, we ain't doing the ADAS. There ain't no message on. I don't want to deal with it. But the bottom line is, not only is that customer the customer of the insurance company, but it's your customer.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
It's your quality control. It's up to you to make the right decision. But it's also the responsibility of the insurance company to ensure that you're doing your job and pay you for that service.
Yeah, perfectly explained. So we went over a little bit about, it being missed upon with catching calibrations, as well as why it's important for the customer, liability, getting it right for the customer. Safety is important. Let's talk a little bit more now about, with ADAS calibrations, there is a misconception with if there's no lights on the dash, then it's fine. There's no need for ADAS calibrations. If I don't have a code, I don't got to calibrate. Preach to me a little bit on what's going on with that. Why do I got to calibrate a car if there's no codes?
Well, let me kind of give you an example. All right. And I challenge every one of the collision shops that when a Kia and Hyundai product come in there, disconnect the connectors to the blind spots and tell me if you have any messages on the dash or you have any codes. Okay. What happens is there's no other module monitoring the blind spot. So even on the OE tool, when it rolls through, it'll just say failed. Well, there's a lot of them that says failed because of the fact that that module isn't on the vehicle. Okay. But you still won't have no indicator on the dash or any indicator on the mirrors. Like GM's, if you disconnect something, the lights are going to be on.
Yep.
They let you know, hey, there's an issue. Toyota Priuses are the same way. It's only when the customer says, hey, this was working before. Otherwise than that, there's no message because the one of the modules, the main module, all right, was disconnected. Okay. But no other modules are monitoring it. So just to say that it don't have any messages, it also comes under product awareness. That was my biggest learning curve myself, is product awareness. What to look for. When I first started doing them pretty heavy, I would actually go out there and, excuse terminology, I'd piss it off. I'd let go of the steering wheel and let's see what it would do, and it would get upset. I want to see how it would react. Because how else am I really going to know how it's supposed to work properly?
Yeah.
And Toyotas, their lane watch, if you let them go for long enough and you keep agitating them, then they'll come up with a little coffee mug saying, take rest now. I thought that was pretty cool.
It is cool.
But just because there's no messages, all right, you have to ensure that you do a proper scan, all right, and then for quality control, that vehicle should be driven even after ADAS calibration techs calibrate it, because the quality control should be double checked.
Yeah.
And that allows the collision center to become a little bit more familiar with the product themselves and how it operates.
Yeah. Of course, because to give another one on top of that, like Subaru, as I'm sure everyone knows, it's the eyesight camera may be displaced after any collision, which is a bit of an issue for some people because the question of what is a collision. Talk a little bit about that too. Why is that even a requirement? Like, why is it saying to calibrate eyesight after any kind of collision?
Well, when you look in Subaru service information, you're out at the OE site, you're trying to fill in, because you're being asked these questions, just like you asked me.
Yep.
Saying Subaru states no matter the collision, all right, you have to calibrate the eyesight. And where I find a lot of the information that isn't physically in their service information is they have educational books, ebooks, PDFs, and they'll talk about vehicle dynamic control, VDC. When you start going through there, that's when they start filling in the blanks. They'll say, hey, there's gyros that are physically up there in the eyesight, and they can be knocked out of calibration, okay? Just like your blind spot, if you're trying to calibrate it and say you get a no-go, well, in service information itself, it won't give you any working numbers. You just have to mess with it, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the vehicle dynamics and control manual, it'll tell you it's plus or minus 5 degrees. So you have to research a little bit farther, and you can download the manuals. You'll pay your $36 or $32 for a day, and you can download up to 50 PDFs in an hour, and after that it restarts. So you can download all this free information. I mean, it's there, but that's why they want you to calibrate.
Yeah, gotcha. That's perfect. Yeah, because everyone has their own requirements. GM, anything above minor cosmetic abrasion, and Honda with structural repairs. It's different for everyone, and there's a reason for it, obviously, for safety for the customer, because you don't know for sure.
Oh,
That's the big thing.
What's even worse that adds insult to injury sometimes is that it won't say it in service information, but when you connect the OE scan tool, it'll ask you, was this vehicle aligned? Yes.
Oh, does it really?
Some of them, yes. you'll find it in the scan tool. And that's where it creates a little controversy.
Yeah.
That's why I've created some screenshots here and there. I'll take a picture of it. Like, did you align it? Did you remove the frame? Like you're looking at a Ford Transit as an example. So you're going to R&R the transmission. Okay. And I challenged my boss one day. Okay. I'll be totally honest with you. I want to see how he'd do. So the shop pulled down the subframe and pulled the transmission out and installed the new one. Okay. And they reinstalled it, and they're driving it down the road. Well, all of a sudden, this lane keep assist is driving them nuts, giving them messages, okay? So I said, well, let me research it. So I looked up the procedure, okay? And this is the fault of a lot of us. We fail to read all the way to the bottom, or we fail to click to go to the next hyperlink. And this is where my boss got caught up into it, because what happened is you're looking through the procedure to R&R the tranny. Then it talks about the subframe and how to remove it and install it, yada, yada. And then it tells you do an alignment, okay? Well, most people won't go to the next page because of the fact that we all know how to do an alignment, right? Well, that's where he stopped. But if you click on the alignment, the first thing it'll tell you to do after you do the alignment is to make sure you calibrate the lane keep assist. See, it's always about continuation, going right down the line. And then in Ford's OE scan tool, it will state, did you perform an alignment? Did you do this? Did you do that? And that's the screenshot you need to capture in case you're called out on it.
Yeah.
But Ford put out that nice position statement here about 2 years ago, which really streamlines a lot of it.
Yep, and Honda Job Aid too, and the GM document, all of it is extremely helpful.
Yes, it is.
Yes, yep. Now, with all of this involving, having no codes to not calibrate, all of that we just talked about too, if we can keep that up, if we continue to just go on that basis, not use tools like ADAS Find, just base it off of what we see. If it doesn't say calibrate front radar in the code, I ain't going to mess with it. If we keep that up, where do you see us going then, like 5-10 years down the line with everything continuing to evolve? Because I know it's a matter of safety for the customer as well, obviously. But keeping that routine up of not doing it correctly, where does that lead a body shop?
It could lead them to potential liability. Because let's say 6 months down the road, they get in an accident, all right, and they find out that the radar, the lane keep assist wasn't working correctly. Because let's face it, all right, doesn't matter if you're young or you're old. It all depends on whether or not you want to embrace the technology.
Yep.
Our company policy is to make sure all the ADAS features are working, okay? So what happens sometimes is after we calibrate and then the vehicle is delivered, sometimes an older customer would bring it in and say, oh, the steering wheel's doing this and that. Oh, they didn't even know they had that feature because the salesman never taught them that it had it or explained it. It's just a difference in the generation.
Yep.
Okay? So let's say, for example, you got a customer that never used that technology, then one day maybe hit that button, and all of a sudden this thing start acting up, and it could lead to a collision. Because Honda actually put out a little video for their technicians. They had Vance like down 500 feet away, all right, from the vehicle. And they showed, because everything's based on the center line of the vehicle, that if he was at center line, 0 degrees at 500 foot, he was holding the rotor, he'd be dead on. If you were 1 degree off at 500 feet, he was almost to the white line on the other side. Because radars kind of look out peripheral, okay? So if you don't have it as best as you can at 0, you could deviate from that. I had a friend one time on a GM product where the bracket had broken, and a lady complained intermittently that when she go under an underpass, the brakes would start to lock up. And what it was is when they inspected it, they found that it was angled up. Now, some manufacturers will incorporate a code knowing that it's way out of deviation, but not all of them have that. It all depends on the software being programmed in. But that could be an enlightening experience, So this was a learning curve for a lot of people, and as the more you experience, the more your knowledge grows. And now we deal with a lot of geometry, and we're dealing with the metric system, which a lot of us were kind of resistant to. But now we're going back to old school to new school.
Bob here, where he works at AI Calibrations in the Michigan area, West Michigan GR. That's where I have learned again from Bob, working with Bob at AI. Michigan has some different requirements on what is necessary for technicians to perform calibrations on these cars. Give a little insight on that. What's necessary in Michigan, at least?
Sure, Owen. You know, when you look into the repair facility manual that Michigan has, they made some changes here a few years ago during the COVID area. And some of them were like an example, if you're doing HVAC work, all right, you can evacuate or you can hang all the parts you want as a collision tech, but you can't evac and recharge. And I think they do that is because you have no working understanding of the system itself. So how can you diagnose it if something ain't working right? But if you're certified, a collision tech is certified, then he can evac and recharge. Now for ADAS, they require you to be certified in electrical. And they do that is because everything's got wires to it. It ain't Wi-Fi that I know of yet. I'm sure it's coming, but they require you to have the electrical certification, okay? And that way they know that you be able to read up on it, understand the wire diagram, be able to apply and diagnose versus someone who doesn't know anything about wires and so forth. All they're doing is pushing buttons. So if you're here in Michigan, what I would do is whoever's providing the service to you, all right, I would ask them to provide their certificate in electrical for you. And if they're providing refrigerant service for you for like R1234YF, then they should be able to provide that certificate for you as well to show that you're certified to do that. Because let's say something happens down the road, all right, well, as we all know, it starts at the top and go downhill, right? Well, if we're coming in providing a service for somebody, we're a subcontractor, all right? So it's going to come right on down to the shop and the subcontractor. And the insurance company is going to say, well, how come you didn't check their credentials? You know, so in Michigan, too, the law states the last one that works on it is responsible for it.
Another thing with ADAS, too, especially with bringing up liability again with performing ADAS calibrations in a body shop. I mean, being the last person to work on it, if you don't keep up with that and there's a problem, it goes on you.
Yes, it does.
But, what other states incorporate that rule? Is it just Michigan, or is there other states? And should everyone in all states in the U.S. incorporate this too?
Okay, when it comes to that, only Michigan currently is requiring a certification. Okay, and a lot of shops haven't realized that they made these updates. It's not like they send you an email or come by and say, hey, listen, we made changes, right? It's your responsibility to look that up. Now, other states don't have that requirement, but back just before COVID really kicked off, myself and many others went in as subject matter experts into a workshop with ASC. Now, we were developing it so that it'd be technically proficient to take this test. It was challenging, okay? I just did one portion of it. Many others contributed, okay? And now they have that test available. So I would challenge the states themselves to look into that and maybe possibly requiring you to be either ASC certified or state certified to perform these calibrations. I mean, you can look on YouTube and see these people doing it out in a parking lot, you know, or on a raised driveway trying to do it. I mean, come on. The manufacturer sets requirements, okay? So I would ask that the insurance companies push for this so that they can get qualified people to work on it. And I would challenge the states to ask for requirements. Be certified, be trained to perform these type of safety operations.
So, because you were just saying, you know, it's not something they send an email out for to get these licenses, would you say most of the technicians undergoing what you do as a profession, as diagnostics and ADAS calibrations, would you say most of the technicians in Michigan are caught up to a license? Or do you know if it's like something that a lot of people kind of don't have and are still performing for body shops?
I would say that the vast majority of the, let's say, mobile businesses should know that. Yeah. All right. The weak spot is the glass companies. All right. They're out there performing the calibrations and that. And then when things don't go right, they tell you to take it to the dealer. Or once in a while, we get some that refer to us.
Yeah.
All right. But once again, they're not certified.
Yeah.
I mean, they're glass installers. But some of them have been very proactive, and they've hired an actual automotive technician that'll perform these calibrations.
Yeah.
Because it's been made aware to them, and they don't want the liability of having it come back to them and say, well, you're not certified. Well, now there's all kinds of repercussions because of that.
Yeah.
So, and probably in Michigan, probably 35 to 40% are probably qualified to do that type of service. The rest of them, I would challenge them and make sure that they're certified in electrical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
Gotcha. And speaking on glass, there is a pretty big difference between OE glass and aftermarket glass when you have a windshield camera. If I bring my Toyota in to get the glass replaced and I ask for aftermarket because it's cheaper, I mean, I want to spend less money and it's just glass. Well, what's the difference? Why would I pay more for OE if it's supposedly better for the ADAS system?
Yes, valid question. Like anything else for parts, they always look like OE equivalent, OE specs, okay? It's a play on words. Now, the manufacturers clearly state they want OE windshields put in, okay? When you put another windshield in, you're not sure if up where the camera is, if the quality control is there. It may be smeared, okay? You may have an imperfection. And I've actually seen this because sometimes when they don't calibrate, you know, you got to remember your phone, the camera on your phone is the same thing that's up in the windshield. So I'll pull the camera out and I'll look at my targets and I'll try to get it up there and I'll take a picture and, you know, take multiple. And you'd be surprised. You can see the distortion in there. And I got pictures of that.
Yeah.
And it's a good example. But at the same token, I've seen OEs that had some distortion in there as well.
Okay. And not even distortion too, but also the brackets can be
Misaligned.
misaligned too.
Yes, sir.
So would you say with glass replacement, just on that for the windshield camera, is it obviously it's safer because, you know, Toyota and everyone else is requiring OE glass to replace.
Yes, sir.
If I were to go get aftermarket, what would you say the odds are that it would work? Because I want to pay a lesser price for aftermarket glass. Is it worth trying it out? Because then you got to take it out again and get an OE one in if it is bad. Is it worth the risk?
It's kind of weird sometimes because when you actually have it priced out, sometimes there ain't nothing more than maybe $50 to $150, $200 difference to have the OE. So you got to remember, when we go in there, we tell them if they have an aftermarket glass, because it's usually in the corner of the windshield, we'll look at it. So you got a 50-50 chance that this will calibrate. And if it don't, then you definitely got to put an OE in. And yes, we are going to charge you twice. So actually, you're running a gamble. You got a 50-50 shot. Does that about answer your question?
That does it perfect.
And insurance companies will try very hard to put the aftermarket in and so forth. But what the collision centers or glass centers can do is say, hey, how about price matching? Can you help me out here? And that way we can get even better quality control, because being part of the problem and not solving the problem, okay, what's the problem? I mean, I don't get it sometimes, you know, but we do make it a point on our repair orders if it's aftermarket.
Yeah. And bumpers are included in that too, correct?
Yes, sir.
Between aftermarket and OE.
Some manufacturers, I'd like to elaborate on bumpers. All right. You look at the Toyota Grand Highlander. All right. They want you to have the bumper removed, the rear one, just for your blind spot. Okay. And you'll check the angle, which would be a calibration. Then they'll want you to put the bumper back on. And now they're going to check the frequency going through that plastic to that radar. And if it don't meet the criteria, then you need to inspect it. Is it aftermarket? Was there, you know, fiberglass put on it? Too much paint? Or is that radar bad?
Yeah.
Okay. And they also do that with the front radar. Volkswagen and Audi, I think, have that now too as well. And I've heard Mercedes. So the manufacturers are stepping their game up a little bit and ensuring ensuring that the quality is there.
Yeah.
Because things can react different. I always, myself, in the beginning, after running into so many issues with aftermarket bumpers being put on for like blind spot, Kappa out there has a nice little sticker that's very reflective, and they would put it right in line with the blind spot. So as we experience more of this, I would educate the shops. All right, hey, part of your quality control, your intake of the part, maybe circle that. That would indicate to the tech you need to remove that tag before assembly. It's all about communication. And now you're asking a tech, if it don't calibrate, extra work. You got to pull the bumper off, inspect. You know, this all hurts your cycle times.
Yeah.
I mean, we can prevent this. We can.
Yeah.
You're going to have them once. It is what it is. Can't change it. But for the most part, we can prevent a lot of it.
Yeah. So essentially, it's worth it to do the job right with paying a little more money than to risk it for a couple $100 and ruining your cycle time on getting the job done, getting the car out.
Exactly.
And
I think if the collision shop, if it's going to hurt their cycle time, okay, then you need to communicate. Keep your customer informed of what's going on. Okay, listen, we're trying to get this calibrated, but you're looking at an extra day because everybody's booked. We had this big storm, and now all the parts have come in, and these guys are overwhelmed. The dealers are the same way. Please try to be patient with us, and then also call up your adjuster and let them know, and keep them in the loop so you don't have any friction. People forget how to communicate these days, and it's a big problem.
it is. Yeah.
I mean, what's so hard about making a phone call? So what? You got to call the agent. You can leave them a voicemail and explain it. Personally, you'd want to personally talk to the customer that you're servicing, not just leave them a voicemail.
Agreed.
That's just me.
Yep.
That way you give it that personal touch.
Yep. For sure. And speaking back on when you were talking about manufacturers stepping up their game, in some scenarios, like GM surround view, for instance, self-calibrating, do you see ADAS going in that direction, or do you see it stopping at some point where, for self-calibrating, sensors and cameras, where do you see that evolving?
I think down the road, it's all going to be self-calibrating. When? It all depends on technology and the price of that technology to incorporate the software. But I think they will be doing their own. And the closer you get to autonomous, vehicles, the narrower you're going to get that, because you won't be in control. AI or whatever's going on, the network system that they'll incorporate will be part of that. Okay, because people really don't realize the first form of ADAS was anti-lock brakes. I mean, they assisted you, and slowing down, taking off for traction control. And as technology moved forward, and the pricing came down to make items smaller, they started incorporating that, because if you're using adaptive control for radar, what are you doing? All right, it's slowing you down, right? Well, that's talking to the anti-lock brake module to apply the brakes a little bit, right? See how it's evolving? And people need to catch up on that. And they need to use the ADAS features. That's the biggest thing. A lot of people don't like to turn them on, or they only want half the system. They don't like the blind spot, or they like the adaptive cruise control, or they don't like the lane keep assist because it shakes the wheel. Well, sometimes there's settings in there, and you can change it to an audible tone. I mean, you just have to read your owner's manual, or the manufacturer will have them on YouTube.
We talked about where ADAS is at right now, how it's being handled, with people typically only catching it if it's on the dash or if a code pops up. Why it's important to catch it, if where you said it's only a degree off for that, was it a radar?
Yes.
If the radar is only a degree off, how off was it further down again?
It was 500 feet away, and it moved Vance almost over to where the white line is, the shoulder. That's huge.
And I mean, it's pretty hard to eyeball a degree too, which is why it's important to calibrate everything, because you don't know for sure until you do it. That's the big thing. Now, the big question is, what can we do to resolve all of this? What can we do to keep up with ensuring it's safe for the customer and catching it? How can I, as a repair, if I was working in a body shop, make sure every single car in here is good to go with comfort, knowing it's good for my customers, safety systems are checked, seat belts are good, all of that.
Well, naturally, it starts at the shop level. We all know that. And, a lot of my customers and stuff are really good friends of mine as well. We develop a good relationship through the time. And their quality control, their standards are very high. They take what they've applied for collision and have gone to the next step for safety. Okay, because before safety was more, airbag related. Now our game's being stepped up. Okay, but same token, the estimator or the collision manager should also reach out to the adjuster and say, listen, these calibrations are required. This is the cost of them. This is why we're doing it. Once again, it's that communication.
Yep.
All right. And then at the same token, when they start, insurance company going to see their numbers go up because they're paying out more, right? They're going to be questioning the people below them. This is the area where we're having an issue. Okay. And they're wanting these people to try to rebuttal everything so they can cut their costs down. All right. Instead, I think that what they ought to do is the insurance company should be the one, along with us at the bottom, working toward the top, and they're working down to us to ensure that we're all on the same page. Let's do what's right for the customer. Yes, it may cost a little more, it may not. To challenge something, there's nothing wrong with that. As for the burden of the proof, I get that.
Yep.
But once the burden of the proof is there shouldn't be any problems. Okay? And then they'll say, well, sometimes they'll tell you to take it to the dealer. All right? And it's really ironic when they take it to the dealer. All right? Because as mobile technicians, or if you're in a facility that does, permanent right there, does calibrations, the insurance company will require us to provide all these screenshots, documentation, the whole works, right? And then they'll say, well, the dealership will do it for half the cost, okay? But for half the cost, they don't get that documentation. They just get a repair order that says calibrated, all right? But as soon as you challenge the dealership and say, I want pictures, I want screenshots, it's amazing how that number goes up because now you're asking them to work. All right, and then you got to remember the tech that you're working with. Is he really computer literate? Does he know how to take a screenshot? I mean, these are all questions. So to answer your question, it starts from the top, which would be the insurance company. It starts at the bottom, where most of us fall, and we need to start working right in the middle. So that communication.
It's a big thing.
Let the insurance agent know what's going on. That way they don't get these surprises. And if they want you to challenge, you're in the process of fixing the vehicle.
Yeah.
All right. So you're not wasting any time. During that time period, where you're wasting time is after the vehicle is done, trying to get paid after it's been delivered.
Yeah.
Let's do it up front. You can look at it as forward planning. I like to call it backwards planning because you're looking at your cycle time date and you're working backwards. If you know the calibrations have to be done and your cycle time's a week, why don't you get a hold of your calibration company and try to give them 3 or 4 days notice so they know what they're dealing with. Send them the ADAS fine report. Send them the CCC report. So let's say they ran into an issue. They can kind of extrapolate what work was done on it to correct that and still make the delivery time if possible.
Yep.
There's a lot of communication, mitigating factors here. And, us as a mobile company, we're working really hard to ensure that our customer's customer is going to get their vehicle back.
Of course.
That's the main goal.
Yeah. Yep. Communication is it. And obviously, it's helpful to use ADAS Find as an estimator or a manager in charge of your estimators to capture your calibrations, but communicating with the insurance and with your customer is what makes it work.
How you get there is when you go out to ADAS Find, it's an easy button. You submit the CCC, you laugh, but this is what keeps people remembering. Hit that easy button, submit it. It'll come back to you. You can review it, and at that point in time, you can either send it out for a quote, so you can be more thorough on your estimate. And at the same token, you can forward that to the adjuster. Say, hey, these are the requirements. We're waiting on a quote if you need it, but we're getting it anyway. So you're being proactive. Yep. It ain't that hard. You're clicking buttons. Technology today. Everybody always asks me, what do you have a degree in? I always say buttonology. I know which button to push.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again for willing to do this. I'm glad we could talk about it. The importance of ADAS in the industry.
Yes, sir.
How we can step up our game in the industry, catching calibrations. As much as it is profitable for businesses, it's more so important for the customer. Liability, ensuring it's a safe repair. That's the biggest thing.
And quality repair.
Yes, of course.
So to hit the easy button.
That's right. All right. Thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day.